Hey guys, today we're going to look at one of the very first movies ever made by my favorite director of all time, Tim Burton. I don't care who says what, I love Burton and his body of work. Some of his films are brilliant, some of them are less brilliant, but the twisted creativity he pours into every frame is just intoxicating to me. One thing that you may not know about him is that if something pops into his head, he has to draw it. He carries around a notepad with him at all times, but if he doesn't have one, he'll just reach for a napkin or a pamphlet or anything that he can get his hands on and just start drawing away. I was lucky enough to see his exhibit at the LA County Museum of Art a few years ago, and before the museum staff caught me and demanded that I put my camera away, I was able to get a picture of a freaking newspaper that he decided to cover with clowns for some reason. And when was this newspaper printed? 1992. Not only does this guy draw every random thing taking a casual stroll through his brain, but he keeps everything he draws, not even caring if anyone will ever see it. Many people are familiar with his short films Vincent and Frankenweenie, which he made in the early 80s back when he was working as a Disney animator. Yeah, Tim Burton animated for Disney. I don't know how common knowledge that fact may or may not be, but I've known that for over 20 years and it still sounds weird to me. But there's one movie you probably haven't seen before, his 1983 adaptation of Hansel and Gretel. It only aired once on the Disney Channel on Halloween of that year, and it has never been aired since. Rumor has it that Tim Burton himself is embarrassed by this movie, so yeah, it's been a little tricky for this film to find its audience. But through the grace of God, someone just happened to be quick enough to tape this movie during its one and only showing, and 30 years later, it finally found its way onto YouTube. Now, having made some lame movies myself when I was younger, I can totally understand someone being embarrassed by the earlier works. But does that justify this movie never having seen the light of day? Well, let's take a look at Tim Burton's Hansel and Gretel and find out. Before the movie begins, we're treated to an introduction by Burton's childhood idol, Vincent Price. Sadly, the movie that's up on YouTube didn't get this part. This was recorded when the movie was on display at the MoMA.
But I hope you enjoy the show. So I'll take this time now. We'll take this time now to say thanks for joining us.
Ah yes, Vincent Price talking to a clown puppet. I'm sure that this is going to be one of the tamest and most not disturbing films ever to have the Disney name on it. Once the credits are done rolling, we then see pretty much what the Tim Burton exhibits in New York and LA would eventually look like. Sadly, it seems that all of these delightfully messed up toys aren't selling as well as their creator would have hoped, and the only children that can get any kind of amusement out of them are his own kids, Hansel and Gretel. But their wicked stepmother will have none of that.
What? What did I just say? Am I the only person who works around here? Do you think you have a slave for a mother? Get back to work! And don't think you can beat me. These walls are my ears. These windows are my eyes. I'm always watching you.
Anything you say, mysterious crossdresser who thinks he's my mother? Call the cops. Yeah, on top of the weird decision to take this European fairy tale and give it an entirely Asian cast, it's my understanding that Burton was really into Japanese culture at this point in his life, it was also decided that the wicked stepmother should be played by a man. Since this movie was made back when it was okay for Burton to make movies that were silly just for the sake of silliness, I'm just gonna assume that this is a fun little homage to Monty Python or something. After a rather uncomfortable dinner scene, the first of many in Burton's career, the kids get sent to their bedless room in the attic, and the what?
Jocko, why can't you take care of us all the time? Why does the awful woman have to live with us? Couldn't we just run away?
Hush, my little dove. She's not here with us now. Maybe someday she'll go away. For now, just close your eyes and wish her away.
Truly inspiring. It's just like the timeless saying goes, when you wish upon a star, you can will people into non-existence. So we have a guy who married someone without any consideration of whether or not she'd be a good mother to his children, to whom he's completely cowed, and instead of comforting his kids with fatherly love and wisdom, he has to use a hand puppet to do it? Sheesh, I know that no one from Hansel and Gretel ever won any Parent of the Year awards or anything, but really? Oh yeah, a little toy swan makes it all better. Thanks, Dad. After a night of what I'm sure was filled with nightmares of all shapes, sizes, and flavors, the stepmother takes the kids for a walk in the woods where they'll no doubt bump into Jack Skellington wandering aimlessly. She tries to ditch them, but of course Hansel was marking their trail with rocks, so he and Gretel find their way home safe and sound.
What if we're walking a walk? But Hansel left pebbles in the path so we could fall in the back, and that's how we found our way home.
The stepmother would later be found eaten alive by their many toys. She decides to make amends the next day by giving them a little present. And we all know what's inside, don't we? Actually, it's a toy duck that she made herself, which then comes to life and eats the kids! No, it turns out that it just eats the rocks as Hansel drops them while the stepmother tries to lose them in the woods again. She succeeds this time, and while Hansel and Gretel sleep in the woods, the duck turns into a transformer? And yet this duck-former is still a more likable character than Skids and Mudflap. The kids decide to follow the duck-former because they think it might be their dad trying to lead them back home, and why would he make it eat their rock trail in the first place? And it leads them to Willy Wonka's house?
Willy Wonka, the amazing chocolatier. Willy Wonka, everybody give a cheer.
Yeah, speaking of the music, this movie just happens to be scored by Johnny Costa, who will always be remembered as the guy who did the music for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. People like to joke about how often Tim Burton uses Danny Elfman to score his movies, but hey, when you've got something that works, you run with it. And of course, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman wouldn't meet until their collaboration on Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1985, but really, can you imagine any of Burton's films with the music done by the guy who did Mr. Rogers?
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
The kids start to eat the house, which seems to be made of giant tofu Pop-Tarts. And of course, we meet the witch who lives inside of it. And she's played by the guy who plays the stepmother.
Who could these two little budgies be? Have they come to stay with me? Hello, hello, hello.
You might think that making the stepmother into the witch may just be the standard trope of turning the realistic childhood antagonist into a fantastical childhood antagonist, like making Miss Gulch into the Wicked Witch of the West, or turning Mr. Darling into Captain Hook, but trust me, this is gonna get a little confusing later. Anyway, she invites them into her house where they can eat some proper food.
You fell for it. It's not a cake, it's a make. See? But try the table. It's rainbow flavor, from Pylamo to cherries to the lee.
Why not just make an actual cake? Surely that would be easier than making edible furniture, wouldn't it? So the kids proceed to eat the table and chairs. Ugh, I feel sticky just watching this movie. And the witch, ever the hospitable hostess, ushers them into a room with neatly made marshmallow beds so they can get a good night's sleep. Perhaps the first one they've ever known in their young lives. And then they're dragged into hell! Seriously, this is Nightmare on Elm Street stuff here! I am amazed that Disney let Tim Burton direct Frankenweenie after this horror show. The witch sends Hansel down into another room, where the only noticeable feature is Beetlejuice's carousel hat worn by a sandworm.
Hello, Dumpling. How's the weather down there? Listen, kid, if you play your cards right, you'll be out of there in no time. And besides, you're the guest of honor for dinner tonight, and I know you'll like the menu.
Yeah, sorry, but you guys are on your own here. I'm just gonna be hiding under my blanket where it's safe. No. It's just a movie. Something to get too scared about. I mean, after all, kids do need to be scared sometimes. I mean, how much worse could this possibly get?
Hi. Oh, it's a hungry little Hansel come to pay me a visit. Is he a famished little boy? Does he want a nice big bite?
Who are you?
I'm Dan, the gingerbread man. Usually just your run-of-the-mill midnight snack, but in this case, more like the Last Supper.
What are you talking about? You want me to eat you?
Don't be such a baby. Eeny, weeny little bite.
Well, maybe just a taste.
That's it.
Because having demon arms grabbing at you through your bed and tossing you into a black void isn't pants fudging enough. Let's meet a creepy as hell gingerbread man who yells at you for not eating him.
If you think I'm tasty and you want my body, come on, Hansel, take a bite.
I'm not eating anymore. You're disgusting.
I said take another bite.
Yeah, anyone else want to bet that child psychologists got a boost in business in November of 1983? While that nightmare is going on, the witch readies the stove to cook the kids. Sheesh, how many chimneys does one stove need? After Hansel smashes the vorophilic cookie like he should have done a long time ago, the witch grabs him to be thrown into the oven, and Gretel starts a fight scene that could really benefit from having some better music. It should also be noted that Tim Burton does not believe in modifying movies once they've been completed, like how George Lucas changed the original Star Wars trilogy. But since he doesn't especially care for this movie... the witch throws everything she can at the kids, including candy cane nunchucks, sugar cookie shurikens, razor-sharp cookie cutters, and paint grenades. And she's finally defeated after doing a flying kick and throwing herself into the oven. Come on, lady, how are you supposed to avoid that even if you did hit the kids? As the witch burns to a crisp, the house starts to fall apart.
They need a bucket. I ate too much ice cream.
Of course, the kids make it out safely, and from out of the gooey destruction, a giant swan boat rises, which somehow carries the kids home. Oh, I get it. It's because their father gave him a little swan earlier. So the kids get back home to their father, but what about their wicked stepmother?
She's gone. We'll never see her again. So now we're safe, like we used to be, remember?
Yeah, remember when I said that the witch being played by the same guy who plays the stepmother was gonna get confusing? This is why. The stepmother just disappears completely off screen? So, what the hell happened? She's gone right after the witch was killed, so was she actually the witch this whole time? If she was, why would she even bother with getting the kids lost in the woods in the first place? If she just has a taste for child flesh, why not just eat them at their house? Why bother dressing up like a witch and building a candy house in the middle of the woods? Speaking of her candy house, remember how the toy duck she made led the kids right to it? Apparently she's a much better toy maker than their father, so why isn't she the breadwinner since he doesn't know how to sell his own toys? Why would she have a giant swan boat on standby in case her house melted down? The kids think that their dad somehow sent it, but how could he if he had no idea where they were? And how did he make it know how to bring them back to their house? He's not an electronics genius like his wife was. If he was, they wouldn't be as abysmally poor as they are. What the hell? Of course! A magical swan boat that comes out of nowhere and takes the kids home would naturally be full of money. I guess it must have come from the genie who wandered off the set of Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater. So that was Tim Burton's Hansel and Gretel. And I'm kind of torn, to be honest. The flaming Burton fan in me is eating this up, so to speak. But yeah, I can also see why Burton himself wouldn't want a lot of people to see this movie. The acting is alright, and it's fun seeing Burton's drawings be brought to life in such a literal fashion like The Nightmare Before Christmas or The Corpse Bride. But the plot doesn't really make sense. The sets look like they come straight out of a school play. Most of the music doesn't provide the emotional impact it's supposed to. And I really hate saying this, but I think this really may be just too frightening for kids. And don't get me wrong, we do need to scare children sometimes. G.K. Chesterton said it best. Fairy tales are more than true. Not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. And sure, other people have played the "it's too scary" card when reviewing Burton's other kids' movies, but seriously, this movie trumps them all. But should this movie remain unseen like it's been for the last 30 years? Hell no! It may be too intense for kids, but there's no reason for this movie to not be enjoyed by older audiences. Not to mention, it does stay true to the original moral of not trusting strangers offering you sweets, so it definitely did what it was supposed to do. And it's fascinating to see this movie after being so familiar with Burton's other work. It really gives you a sense of perspective seeing just how far he's come as a visual storyteller. It's best to regard this not so much as a movie, but more like a 16mm time capsule. So, in conclusion, I highly recommend this movie to anyone who happens to be a fan of Tim Burton, patrons of obscure and forgotten cinema, or anyone who just likes to scar the psyches of small children. See you next time.
You know, Hansel, I feel pretty crummy.
Subscribe, like, follow.